Hollywood has long been on a treasure hunt, seeking properties from various mediums that can be transformed into box office gold. One of the most coveted sources in this search has been video games. On paper, this seems like a natural progression. Video games, particularly modern ones, have evolved into highly cinematic experiences, complete with intricate narratives, well-developed characters, and stunning visuals. Yet, despite the undeniable potential, time and time again, video game movie adaptations have proven to be lackluster. No matter how big the budgets or how beloved the game franchise, these adaptations tend to fall short, leaving both gamers and moviegoers disappointed. So, what keeps going wrong? Let's dive deeper into the recurring mistakes that plague video game adaptations and explore whether Hollywood should reconsider these ventures altogether. One key issue is the source material itself. When studios opt to adapt older or niche video games, they alienate a large portion of the audience. A good example of this is the film Rampage, based on a 1980s arcade game. While it certainly has its loyal fans, by the time the movie was released, most modern audiences had little familiarity with the original game. This makes it hard to establish a broad appeal. Although Rampage was bolstered by star power with Dwayne Johnson in the lead role, the film still fell into the forgettable pile. Neither a box office bomb nor a hit. Even when the game being adapted is more recognizable, the transition from controller to screen is riddled with challenges. Look at major franchises like Tomb Raider or Assassin's Creed. These are not obscure games, they are cultural touchstones with millions of players and enormous fan bases. Yet their film adaptations, despite big budgets and established actors, also failed to live up to the hype. One common reason is that the filmmakers often misunderstand what made these games beloved in the first place. Take Assassin's Creed as an example. Starring Michael Fassbender and backed by a franchise with an intricate blend of action, stealth, and historical immersion, it seemed poised to be a hit. Instead, the film focused too heavily on the least loved aspects of the series, the convoluted futuristic plotline surrounding the main character's ancestor. This was a critical misstep. Fans of the game tolerated the futuristic segments, but it was the historical settings and stealthy action that truly resonated. Another factor hindering these adaptations is the changing landscape of video games themselves. Over the years, video game graphics and storytelling have evolved to such an extent that many modern games already feel like interactive films. Games like Life is Strange and The Wolf Among Us offer complex, narrative-driven experiences where player choices heavily influence the story. In some cases, gameplay becomes secondary to the cinematic experience, leaving little room for traditional action or challenges. This creates a unique problem when adapting such games to film. Audiences who have already experienced the story firsthand through interactivity are unlikely to enjoy a watered-down, passive version of the same narrative. For a medium that thrives on immersion and player agency, video games lose something critical in the translation to film. It's difficult to recreate the emotional connection a player feels after spending dozens of hours immersed in a game's world. Video games are long-form narratives that allow players to gradually invest in the characters, settings, and plotlines. By contrast, movies are restricted to a 2-hour format, which can result in oversimplification or outright omission of key story elements. This compression often leaves fans feeling as though the movie version is just a shadow of the game they loved. In some cases, filmmakers attempt to rectify this by making significant changes to the source material, but this approach also tends to backfire. One of the more successful video game adaptations, the Resident Evil movie franchise, took enormous liberties with its source material. While the films found an audience and continued for 6 entries, fans of the original games were often left scratching their heads at the disconnect between the games and the movies. The campy B-movie thrills of the films were wildly different from the tense, survival horror tone of the games. While this creative direction worked for some, it left a lot of potential untapped by deviating so far from what made the Resident Evil games popular. One of the fundamental challenges in adapting video games to film is that the interactive nature of games doesn't translate well to a passive medium like cinema. In a game, players can shape their experience by making choices, solving puzzles, or exploring at their own pace. This interactivity is central to the enjoyment of gaming, and without it, the story often feels flat. It's as though adapting a video game into a movie is inherently flawed. Gaming's greatest strength is its ability to engage players actively, while film is all about passive observation. Imagine trying to turn a game like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild into a film. Much of the joy of the game comes from exploring its expansive open world at your own pace, discovering secrets, and interacting with its beautifully crafted environment. Trying to capture that sense of wonder and freedom in a 2-hour film is nearly impossible. The essence of the experience is lost when you reduce it to a linear, fixed narrative, no matter how well-directed or well-acted the film might be. Another major issue in the adaptation process is the sheer length and complexity of many modern video games. Games like The Witcher or Mass Effect often span dozens of hours, with intricate plots that take their time to unfold. Condensing all that into a 2-hour movie inevitably results in the removal of key storylines, characters, and lore. This is a problem with any adaptation, of course, but video games are particularly vulnerable because of the sheer scope of their storytelling. A film adaptation can end up feeling like a mere highlight reel of the game's best moments, with little of the depth that made the game so engaging in the first place. Casting is another challenge that video game adaptations frequently get wrong. Games often feature beloved characters voiced by talented actors who become closely associated with those roles. However, when it comes time to cast the live-action version, studios often choose to prioritize star power over authenticity. While it's understandable from a marketing perspective, this can alienate fans who are already deeply attached to the game's original portrayal. A character like Nathan Drake from Uncharted, for example, has a specific look, voice, and personality that fans have grown to love over the course of multiple games. Recasting that role with a different actor, no matter how talented, risks breaking that connection. On the production side, there's also a historical lack of enthusiasm from top-tier filmmakers when it comes to video game adaptations. Some of Hollywood's most respected directors have dabbled with the idea of adapting video games, but these projects often fall apart before coming to fruition. Peter Jackson, for instance, was once attached to a Halo adaptation, while Gore Verbinski tried to bring BioShock to the screen, and John Woo expressed interest in adapting Metroid. In each case, these projects fizzled out before making it past the development stage. When top talent gets involved, something always seems to derail the process. When filmmakers do take on video game adaptations, they often make the mistake of trying to cater to a broader audience at the expense of fan loyalty. This results in a diluted version of the game that loses what made it special. Games, particularly long-standing franchises, are often filled with intricate lore and fan service moments that can't be fully appreciated by casual viewers. Yet, filmmakers feel the need to strip away these elements in favor of a more generic, broadly appealing story. This pleases neither the hardcore fans nor the general audience, leaving the movie stranded in an unsatisfactory middle ground. There have been some recent glimmers of hope for video game adaptations, particularly on television. Long-form storytelling, which allows for more plot development and character exploration, seems to be a better fit for many video game narratives. Netflix's Castlevania and Arcane have both managed to stay true to their source material while telling new and compelling stories. Similarly, HBO's The Last of Us has been praised for working closely with the creators of the game and maintaining the emotional depth of the original story. Television adaptations allow for the kind of sprawling, episodic storytelling that video games excel at, making them a more natural fit than feature films. It's becoming increasingly clear that video games, with their complex stories and rich world building, are better suited for long-form television series rather than condensed 2-hour films. Rather than giving up on video game adaptations entirely, Hollywood might just need to rethink the medium in which these stories are told. The allure of adapting video games into blockbuster films won't go away anytime soon. But for these adaptations to succeed, studios need to embrace the things that make games unique, rather than trying to force them into the mold of a traditional film. Whether that means moving more projects to television, staying true to the source material, or finding new ways to preserve the interactive magic of gaming, the potential is there. However, if Hollywood continues down the same path, we're likely to keep seeing the same disappointing results.